Welcome everybody to the webinar today. We're going to be focusing on discussion between integrated solutions between Triax Technologies and then Jovix. We'll be focusing today on how to improve construction productivity via centralized material, equipment, and personnel tracking data, all consolidated in a single platform and integrated environment. So appreciate everybody attending today, and let's go ahead and get started with some introductions here. So my name is John Walker. I'm Vice President of Strategic Services here at Atlas RFID Solutions. Been on board here at Atlas for about 8 or 9 years, I guess, and previous experience was in the EPC space, industrial construction space, working as field materials management and field procurement side of things. So, let Ian introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. My name is Ian Willett. I'm the Vice President of Product here at Triax Technologies. I'm also our Principal Data Scientist, and our team focuses on catering advanced use cases for our clients to execute both productivity and safety outcomes.
Perfect. All right. So obviously safety is super important to both of our companies here. So we want to take a quick moment to remind everybody about dehydration. I think we're approaching the summer months right now, and dehydration, and you can see how to correctly pronounce that up there, is an abnormal loss of water from the body. So there's also some warning signs to really keep in mind as you're out working in the field or even working around your house, like in the yard. I was doing a whole bunch of yard work this week, and it's hot here in Alabama, and so I had to continually get fluids into my body as dehydration was something to really consider. But everything from your appearance, are you alert, or are you becoming restless and irritable? Those are signs that you may have some dehydration. And then skin elasticity, that's one as well. You can pinch your skin to see if you have certain levels of dehydration coming on. And then obviously some of the more prevalent ones that you would feel is are you thirsty, right? Is your mouth and tongue dry? And those are really good key indications that you could have dehydration approaching. So as we enter this summer months, at least in the northern hemisphere, and a lot of hotter temperatures start coming about, just keep in mind the dehydration aspect and keep that front of mind. So next, I want to go through the agenda and some of the items that we'll discuss today. So just went through introductions and the safety. And what I'd like to do is start with just a brief company introduction of Jovix and Triax, and talk a little bit about our companies and the space that we live in. And then get into start understanding how our solutions impacts work productivity. And then what does an integrated solution look like, and what are some of the ways that we've rolled personnel, equipment, and materials tracking out into the field, and what are some of the questions that we've been able to answer when integrating these IoT, auto ID solutions with people and materials. So those are some of the topics that we're going to cover today. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit about Atlas and level set here. Some of you may be familiar with this, some not. So Atlas RFID Solutions is the company, and our product is called Jovix, and that stands for Job Site Visibility Extension. We were founded in 2007, and we're a software company at heart, and I'll show a platform overview here in a second that shows how we also integrate hardware and professional services into the equation to provide a good experience and a solution for our clients. But we're a software company at heart, and really focused on our software platform of Jovix. And so really key functional pieces of the software revolve around the digital supply chain. So working with suppliers, digitize assets, attach RFID tags, create digital packing lists prior to materials shipping to the job sites, as well as providing track and trace functionality, which is really where we got our start. Track and trace is essentially just putting RFID tags on materials and knowing where they're at throughout the supply chain to quickly get those materials to construction. Last two pieces are focused on digital field materials management. So some of the transactions that take place out in the field around materials management, digitizing those on your devices that are out there in the field, such as receipt, picks, and issues, and then rolling in the inspection aspects of preservation and maintenance. As I stated in the beginning, we're in Alabama, but we do have employees worldwide scattered around various project sites throughout the globe. That's a little bit about our company, and When we talk about Jovix, it's really talking about a platform. I mentioned we're a software company, but we've developed a platform to help with material readiness, and that's essentially ensuring that materials are ready to when installation is needed. And that's not just keeping them ready at the job site. That's understanding where they're at throughout the entire supply chain. And it really starts with some key components. And number one is collecting data of those assets and really using sensor-based technologies, IoT, and readers as well to understand in the supply chain where these assets are at from automated side of things, whether they're scanning them from a drone, scanning them from a gate reader. It's really being able to understand where they're at. Next is, interacting with that data from our software platform that, as I mentioned earlier, really covers track and trace, field transactions. And then a big one that we've seen a lot here lately is supplier engagement and really understanding, the digital supply chain and providing that advantage for our clients. And then, sharing the data is a key aspect, and that's what we're really talking about here today is that, we're really, really laser focused on providing, material traceability, and understanding where those materials are at throughout the supply chain. But we also have partners like Triax, who's laser focused on equipment and materials. And so how do we integrate with those platforms? We have an open API called Jovix Connect that allows us to integrate with Triax and other key partners that are out in this ecosystem so that we can provide our clients with kind of best of breed tools that are out there. And then one of the things that we'll be talking about towards the end is really around the insights that you can gain, not only from just using the Jovix platform, but then also, how are these insights used in integrated environments like we have between Triax and Jovix, right? And so, our action data side of things is really key, focused on our Jovix Insights platform. So with that, that's a little bit about our company, Atlas, and our Jovix software platform. And I'll turn it over to Ian to run through some of the Triax technologies overview.
Thanks, John. So Triax is a leading player in the industrial IoT market. What this fundamentally means is we serve as a connectivity solution around people and equipment in very challenging IT environments. These are IT environments that are power constrained, very dynamic. So we're on 150 job sites to date. 35,000 workers, and we've logged about 8.5 million man hours. We're headquartered in Norwalk, Connecticut, and our Spotter platform allows us to deploy a network on site that's both practical from a deployment perspective, but also functional from an information perspective. We deploy that network in a robust fashion, meaning only about 1 out of every 8 of our network nodes needs to be plugged in. The rest actually can function off of batteries in the field for up to 9 months. This gives you a really flexible and easy deployment. And just to give you an idea of the scale of the network, we typically install roughly 20 to 30 network nodes in a Manhattan-style high-rise, or even over hundreds of acres. It's well under 60 network nodes for the industrial space. What lives on this network are a slew of devices. Our flagship device is what we call the Spotter Clip. This is our worker wearable, and it has a collection of functions centered around time and attendance, but also for some of the use cases we're going to go over later, our real-time location services. So we are able to let you know on a constant basis where all of the workers are from a floor, so an elevation perspective, and also a zone, which is how we articulate horizontal location. We're not GPS. We're a job site specific location service. So we provide robust location services while you're on the job site, but when you're off the job site, we're maintaining that worker privacy. In addition to the location services, we have safety functionality built into this wearable. We have a panic button on the bottom along with free fall detection in the clip. These provide real-time notifications to personnel to get help to individuals should they need it. And each device can actually function as its own personal evacuation alarm should an administrator proc an evacuation, letting each individual know it's time to muster. In addition to that functionality, we have the Spotter evac tag. This goes on to that evacuation alarm a little bit in higher decibels for the alarm, but also cues in visual LED cues for noisy environments. It's just another piece of equipment that lets folks know it's time to muster and to get out of the current work areas. From an equipment perspective, we have the Spotter Equip tag. Its function is to go after equipment similar to how the clip goes after the worker, and that's to provide location services both on a floor and zone perspective. Importantly, this is a little bit unique from some of the telematics people are familiar with for two reasons. Number one, it performs very well in indoor and outdoor environments, or should you have a mixture of the two. And additionally, we measure utilization in a unique way. We have the runtime usage, which is typical in telematics, but we're also able to identify operators. And that becomes very useful for pieces of equipment like scissor lift, where actual utilization is measured by occupancy, not engine runtime. So we have a lot of folks using it for their fleets in that way. And in addition to that, we're able to identify who should be operating equipment and who should not from a safety perspective. The last piece is a point of interest tag. These are check-in beacons, and they allow you to get more high-res information about location and interactions with workers than our zone system does from the network. So an example of this is you may want to know if someone's interacting with the permitting office or a certain stack of materials, and you can use points of interest to do that. They're also used for restricted areas, check-in stations, and confined space. And we can flip through that. All of these devices here have battery lives in the ranges of months. Our worker wearable lasts about 4 to 6 months between charges in the field. And again, that's just another approach that we've taken to make a very practical deployment of tech in the field rather than daily recharging, which would break down over time.
Thanks, Ian. That's good. Now that we've covered the companies as well as the technologies that our companies provide out into the field, we really want to focus on the what. Why do we exist in this market space, and what are we trying to solve? And ultimately, we're looking at being able to have work package or scope of work constructability. And in order to do that, we need to identify and look at the typical constraints and the categories these constraints live in. So if we take a look at some of the more typical constraints that exist against scopes of work or work packages, they're come in a variety of flavors. Some of the most well-known are obviously material constraints, tools and equipment, safety, engineering data such as drawings and other necessary checks and balances from the engineering group to ensure that we're building things properly, and then the labor to support the actual construction. So these key groupings are where a lot of the constraints live with work package constructability. And so if we look at our companies and how we impact these, obviously from a Jovix side of things, we live heavily in the materials aspect, and Triax lives heavily in the labor, tools, and equipment. We both are laser focused on creating a safer environment to work in, such as knowing does the worker have the proper restrictions to be in a zone, or are the materials moving properly around the job site and not exposing my workers to risk. These things are on the forefront of our mind at all times from a safety aspect. But these are the areas that we as two companies want to exist and do exist in terms of alleviating constraints on work packages. So if I dig down a little bit and talk about some of the material impacts of against work packages and how we as Jovix alleviate some of those, some of the typical ones that we're seeing and some of the issues that we see out in the field are lack of supply chain visibility, right? Or how are my materials coming? Inability to quickly process materials, unknown material constraints, temporarily misplaced materials, and then lagging performance metrics to let me understand how I'm actually performing from a materials perspective on the job site. And some of the questions that we're focused on answering, so the supply chain side of things, how are my goods shipping? Are they shipping by work package as I asked the suppliers, or did my materials actually ship on time? And then once those materials arrive on the job site, can I check them in and ensure they're in good quality? And another key piece that really dovetails into the lack of supply chain visibility are the unknown material constraints. When we order a pump, it's typically not just a pump, it's a pump with 50 shipless components. Are we adequately planning for all those individual subcomponents in our work package? And so we really want to be able to know those material constraints. The temporarily misplaced materials is a historic one, right? I think we were all familiar with misplacing things, whether it be on a job site or just around our house. And so, we're laser focused on being able to provide RFID tags and other auto ID IoT sensors to help keep up with goods around the job site. So when construction needs the items, can we go and find them? And then one of the things that we'll be talking about here towards the end of the presentation today are lagging performance metrics and insights. Can I keep up with demand, and what is my productivity rate out of a laydown yard for feeding the beast, if you will? Am I getting enough linear feet of pipe out so that I can meet construction and scheduled demands? These are all things that we really want to focus on from lagging performance metrics. So how are we doing that? From the Atlas side of things, we've created this concept of the digital supply chain. And what that is extending the authoring of information in a digital format up to the suppliers through mobile apps and other sensor-based technologies. So the digital packing lists are actually created by the supplier on a mobile app in a centralized database instead of spreadsheet bingo back and forth or sending PDF files back and forth of advanced notices or packing lists. We're really digitally authoring these goods and creating this digital packing list at the supplier's facilities. And then once those goods arrive on the job site, rolling out mobile devices to receive them into inventory and to manage that inventory, and then effectively pick and issue those goods out to construction to eliminate a lot of the manual data entry that typically goes back and forth with a paper-based process. And then temporarily misplaced materials, being able to put the RFID tags, whether it's active, passive, or even barcodes, to be able to identify and keep up with assets around the job site is critically important. I mentioned the pump example. Here's a pump, and then I think we all know that there's subcomponents with that pump. So with the digital supply chain, we're not only RFID tagging or barcoding the main components, but we're also keeping up with the anchor bolts, the China hats, the grating, the other components that go into these pumps that oftentimes provide material constraints to the workforce. And then being able to graphically represent the performance of our materials management team through our insights platform really helps reduce lagging performance metrics that allow us to understand how we're focused on feeding the beast of construction. And from a safety aspect, I think we all can understand that an organized space, knowing a plan, is really key to safely executing work. And that's our goal from a materials perspective, is to understand the plan, keep everything organized, and then have workers work safely around these environments that we have our software and our components for tracking. So that's really how Atlas is focused on work package constructability and some of the technologies that we're rolling out. I'll turn it over to Ian to briefly explain, why Triax exists in this space.
Absolutely. So to steal kind of a Jovix line, we look at not material readiness, but people and equipment readiness to execute the work package. So this starts off just as simple as, do I have the folks that I need to execute the task I think I need to, along with equipment? But additionally, once on the job site, do I have the people and equipment in the right places to execute the tasks at hand? So our platform provides the real-time location services for both the people and equipment, along with automated headcount. We do have access control, another way to restrict access to your job site, layering on some safety and security. And we take all of this and, from a work package standpoint, look at industrial tool time. So how often and how much productivity am I getting out of folks? And if I'm not getting the type of productivity I need, looking at what are the constraints or bottlenecks that are causing those lacks of productivity, and diving deeper into work plan optimization along with workflow optimization. So what does this mean from a visual perspective? So I've talked a lot about real-time location services here. So we've gridded out the site here with our network. So you're getting full connectivity across this entire petrochemical facility here. You'll notice that we've gridded out the site. These grids are created working with our deployment specialists, but also the client. They typically are engineered around logical units of space for the client and kind of how they divide their work site and how they think about work on their work site. Interesting note here is just how practical this network is. You'll notice that there's kind of these spider webs different colors. Each one of those represents a network cell. And you'll see that there's about 6 cells here, meaning only 6 of these devices are plugged in. The rest are operating on those D-cell batteries for 9 months. So very quick and practical deployment, took less than a day to set up, and now they have constant connectivity for their workers and equipment on any given day. Each zone can be labeled as productive or non-productive. We also have points of interest, which are beacons, and you can kind of, if you look at the laydown yard, if you want to understand, are they interacting with one of the buildings within the laydown yard, maybe a permitting office, you can get insights of higher resolution on using points of interest. From a productivity standpoint, what this allows us to do is essentially score each subcontracting group or the site in general with a productivity score, identifying how much tool time we estimated for a given day. Should you see a lack of tool time there, you're able to look into where people are occupying space and what's drawing them to different places that are non-productive for them, and decompose the workflows to become more productive.
Thanks, Ian. So we talked a little bit about, obviously, who the companies are. We talked a little bit about our solutions. We talked about why we exist in this space. But now I want to focus a little bit on what do we look like combined, and what have we done? What does our integration do? And what are some of the answers that we can obtain from an integrated solution between Jovix and Triax, tracking materials, people, and equipment? So at the most basic, you kind of break it down in different levels. The most basic level, obviously, is level 1. We're able to understand really where all the people, equipment, and materials are on site and throughout the supply chain that are fueling this project, and really being able to get an understanding of where my assets are at in one single centralized database. And that's a key piece of the puzzle right there, in keeping up with some of your most critical elements to being productive on the job site. Level 2 is integrating the solutions to supplement specific transactions. And I'm going to dig deeper into each one of these levels here in a second, but being able to utilize data from Triax's system and utilize activities around transactions from Jovix's system to really create a more valuable environment for clients using the combined solutions. And then level 3, this is where you really get into the kind of 1 + 1 = 3 mentality of a valuable integrated solution, is being able to answer questions that have historically been difficult or quite frankly impossible to answer in the past. And we're about to dig into specific examples around each one of these levels and how we have a tool or integrated solution around it. So if we take a look at this, just level 1, one basic example of understanding materials and people proximity. Some of the value that you can gain out of this is, within Jovix, you can go in and look at completability against schedule activities or work packages within Jovix from a materials perspective. Then you're able to see on a map where all of those materials are at. And once you're able to understand where those materials are at, you can then see where people are at on that map as well. So if I need to get materials requested and picked and issued to construction, I know who's in my laydown yard, and I know where those materials are at, so I can create a pick list and then assign that, and it can alert the Triax user to go and pick those materials using the GPS and RFID, and then issue those materials out by scanning a spotter badge. And then you can receive an alert when the worker enters the construction zone with that specific material. So once you're able to take a look at a map and have all of your materials and all of your people, and you know where they are in proximity to each other, you're able to assign logical events to workers within proximity of those materials to go accomplish a task. So that's really kind of looking at it from a level 1, is knowing where your materials and people are at in a centralized format is really important, really critical. Digging a little bit deeper, kind of the level 2 side of things, integrating the employee tracking with some of the field materials management transactions that take place. I oftentimes think of this as kind of care, custody, and control exchange. So Triax is using their spotter badges to track people throughout the project site, and there are barcodes and other forms of QR codes on the outside of these badges that then point to the specific employee. So if I have a grouping of materials and I've got to go give it to the construction superintendent, at point of care custody and control exchange, I can scan the tracker spotter badge and then be able to know that I have given those 10 pipe spools to Bob, the construction superintendent. So really being able to leverage the data back and forth between the two systems in this integrated environment really supplements some of the field transactions that take place out in the field, and being able to leverage the existing infrastructure that Triax is providing to accomplish these tasks. I think that's a real key kind of level 2 example of how we are currently integrating this information on projects. And then really the level 3, I'll have kind of Ian get into this. We're going to dig pretty deep into some analytics and some data scientists. Ian's going to show his brain power here in a second and walk us through this level 3 use case of some of the answers that we can obtain from integrated environments.
Absolutely, thanks, John. Yeah, so when we talk about level 3, what we're talking about is not just having visibility on all 3 factors here, your material, the equipment, along with your personnel, but also getting predictive about those and being able to plan given all of the smarts that you've accumulated over the last few weeks or days through your capital project. So the use case we're going to run through, it's an industrial CapEx project that was shut down early for COVID. We have historical data over the last 6 to 7 months, both from a pipe inventory and output, thanks to the Jovix platform, along with laydown yard staffing levels, along with equipment availability for pick operations such as cranes and trailers. And what we want to look at is, we need to restart this project together with our client and providing them some support to hit the targets for their aggressive schedule that they're setting now that they're so far behind for various reasons. And we want to do that from the angle of looking at the laydown yard and really understanding what type of support resources, such as the dedicated crew for the laydown yard, cranes and trailers, are needed to feed the beast of the skilled tradesmen executing the work packages throughout the rest of the facility to hit a new and aggressive schedule.
So Ian, a couple questions that I'd like to have answered, and I think a few of our clients would probably like to have answered is, when you're looking at these restarts or when you're looking at adjusted schedules, when will my materials be ready and what schedule can I support from a supply chain perspective is oftentimes key. And then, in order to, like you're saying, feed the beast, I really want to dig in and understand what staffing and equipment levels do I need to support the accelerated schedule. So, how many cranes, how many, riggers will I need? What is the infrastructure that I need to then fuel this accelerated schedule? Or a couple of questions that I really kind of want to get out of this next example. So I think you're about to probably walk us through what that looks like.
Yep, absolutely. So with the visibility that we've had and the luxury that this client's had from deploying 2 solutions on the job site, we really have full visibility into inventory levels, output, and how do those correlate to schedule. So the project has already slipped 79 days minimum just from shutting down. You don't need analytics to figure that one out. But when you actually look at the inventory levels here at the top figure, the orange line is showing the inventories as spools are showing up onto this job site. The blue or purple line is really showing you what the schedule had anticipated for output. And thanks to the materials leaving the yard and being tracked, we have the actual output of pipe, which you can see is roughly the level that we expected, but does dip on a pretty consistent basis below the schedule. So in addition to the logical, the obvious 79-day delay, we're already 50 days behind before the shutdown. So this is motivating the client to be very aggressive and accelerate their schedule quite a bit to make up for those 129 days of slipped work. So with that, there's some problems, obviously. So what you're looking at in this figure is the blue line, again, is the original schedule that the client had set forward. The green line is their initial stab at, okay, what is it going to take to make up those days now that I can reopen. The 2 problems that you have to kind of grapple with here are, okay, you have this targeted output per day, which is pretty consistent over time, but is your supply chain ready for that, right? And you can see that this schedule right here, if you look at the orange line, that green schedule, the aggressive schedule, is running through that inventory faster than it can be replenished. meaning you're ripping through inventory faster than, and towards the tail end of these cycles, there'll be no material left to install. Once that material level does ramp, you can see in July, about 2 months into the restart, they're going to be required to output at a scale that is atypical for any of the projects that they've done before. So they're looking to us to really help them understand, okay, well, what type of support do I need to facilitate this type of output, because we've never done this before. So really looking at, again, what do I need to do to feed the beast now that I've kind of redefined what the beast is? So there's a lot of good news. We have been tracking, both from an inventory perspective and a people and equipment perspective, what's gone on in the past, and we can use those data points as insights to drive our future goals and schedule. So you're seeing that initial figure of both the schedule along with the output and inventory levels. Thanks to the Spotter platform, in addition to Jovix, tracking the inventory levels along with output, the Triax platform has been able to track both the number of cranes, trailers, and headcount that were present as support resources in that laydown yard. What is difficult, though, is to really decompose, okay, from those levels of support resources such as cranes, headcount, and trailers, what were driving the output or lack thereof over the course of the schedule. So when that green line dips, was it the people, was it the equipment? Really hard to see both from a visual perspective, but even if you kind of went into Excel and tried to do some higher level analytics, really difficult to decompose those signals. So in this next slide, we're going to go through some of the more advanced techniques that we have at our disposal now, specifically leveraging machine learning to decompose the signals here and make ourselves a tool that can be predictive in what type of staffing levels and what type of equipment levels we need to actually feed the beast, given the number of resources that will be available thanks to the supply chain. So I'm going to go through some complex things on this slide. I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you take anything away from this slide, it's just knowing that this is a really difficult problem for the human brain to tackle, which is great news in the sense that we live in an era where we have AI and machine learning that can pull these signals out for us. So for the folks who do want to go a little bit deeper, it's actually a really unique modeling problem. Was pretty fun to work on because it's not a typical regression problem where all of the factors are kind of together driving, the output here. Only one of these inputs can really be a constraining factor at a time. And so what do I mean by that, right? So the effect of people and equipment isn't independent along the entire range as you staff up or ramp down your equipment. And what I mean by that is that adding a person may have zero effect because that's not the constraining factor here. So if you look at the right, you'll see this is a simple regression model on headcount to the output out of the laydown yard. And what you're looking at are two different models. One model, the red line, which goes over the entire range of the data, and then a smaller model, which is a quantile regression model, looking at the lower range of headcount. And you can see that the slopes are different. And the slopes estimate, basically, given an individual worker being added, how much more linear feet could I expect in a given day? The point here is that the two models estimate very different numbers, 24 feet per day in the full model and 260 feet per day in the quantile regression model. And what's happening here is that quantile regression is more accurately articulating what's going on and what's the constraining factor because when you have lower amounts of worker, it's likely the workers who are constraining. Whereas if you have higher numbers of workers, or as we get to the right, it's much more likely that it's really your cranes and trailers causing this signal. And it's really giving you kind of an artificial signal from people that you could interpret in a less than effective way. So we use a machine learning algorithm behind the scene here to look at all three in conjunction and really understand what is the theoretical output of each of the resources, assuming that they're not constrained by the other two. And this allows us to have a calculator, which we'll go through on the next page, to really help you plan in a predictive and proactive manner to ensure that you have the appropriate amount of resources to reach the outcome that you've kind of drafted up. So we'll go back to the schedule. Let's go back to the schedule. So you'll see on this top figure here, we have the original schedule in the orange line. That was, assuming that there was no shutdown, no global pandemic. We had the initial stab at, okay, what would it take to hit our schedule now that we're starting up here at the start of June? The blue line is now the adjusted SMART schedule. And this is thanks to two big things. Number one, early, Jovix is telling us, hey, your supply chain is not ready. And so we're actually going to throttle back some of the resources, which I'll explain down in the lower figure. But as the supply chain starts to ramp up and catch up, we're actually suggesting a higher output than was initially planned, even in the new schedule. But not only are we providing an adjusted schedule, we're providing a roadmap of how do you accomplish that schedule, right? So now we're getting predictive. Okay, here's your schedule. Let's predict the number of resources you need to achieve that schedule. And so we've used the machine learning algorithms driven by IoT data to give you staffing levels that will result in a reliable, predictable, and schedule-aligned output. And you can see as the project goes underway, to achieve that reliable and predictable output, we're recommending 3 ramps of both headcount and trailers, and minor ramps up of cranes as they output quite a bit more. So really providing a full blueprint of how do you execute this plan, both from a throttling perspective, should you need to, so you're not throwing too much resources at too little materials, but also allowing you to ramp kind of into the unknown and uncharted compared to your previous CapEx projects. Pretty powerful.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That's also, kind of from past experience, it's always been a nightmare being able to try and predict how many people will I need to service in the laydown yard or in the warehouse or other aspects of kind of materials management. And oftentimes it's a very labor intensive activity to be able to understand output based on schedule and all this other thing. So what we're saying here is these two combined solutions provide insights at a very predictable calculator to determine the right amount of equipment, people, and tools based on the inbound supply chain and demand from construction to be able to get it right. It's no longer kind of taking a stab in the dark. So it's really good. I appreciate you walking through that aspect, and really excited about what we've come up with here today and talk through. And I want to kind of recap a lot. I know we covered a whole bunch. Today's discussion was really to open the mind about the benefit and the value of real-time centralized data from a materials perspective, as well as from labor and equipment perspective, and how those two integrated systems can provide insights to answer the tough questions, and like I said, oftentimes the impossible questions to get right. Really being able to look at all that data together to make better, more informed decisions for your projects. And I think one thing to note is, I know we're in a very unique situation with COVID-19 impacting restarts, shutdowns, whatever part of the world you're in, but without a global pandemic, this tool is still super valuable, right? These are things that we struggled with years in the past about being able to predict the right amount of people, materials, and equipment. And we're looking at this in a microcosm of the laydown yard, but future thoughts is really expanding this to the work face, and looking at things such as earned versus burned, and then being able to look at the number of workers in a specific zone, part of the plant, and looking at the number of materials that are in that zone as well, and then being able to really understand productivity around those things. And once you have the ability to track your people, your materials, and then the equipment, you're able to really start understanding how productive I am. And those are some future things that we're really trying to drive here. And what we wanted to recap today is, what we're doing, what's out there, what's the possibility, but just open the mind about how we use this data moving forward, and these two combined solutions. I think it's a lot of value for the industry. So we really appreciate the time here today. Our contact information is up on the screen. So shoot us an email, reach out with any questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. And I appreciate everybody's time today, and that's a wrap.